On this week's Gridiron Report, we have a Lions trade that somewhat changes the landscape of this team, NFLPA grades, and then, as always, Grit of the Week. And it's all brought to you by Pins and Aces, our favorite spot for all your golf apparel needs. Use promo code GRIT for 21% off any product at pinsandaces.com. Let's get into it.
In the heart of the city where the lights grow dim, grit and grind every inch, every rim, from the underdogs rising to the legends that win. It's the Grit Iron Report, let the games begin. Every highlight's a journey, roads paved with fire, sweat, tears, and hustle that never expire. From the rookies on the rise to the old hands retire, Grit Iron is the place for fans to conspire. Hustle on blast, beats thundering loud. Champions are born from the roar of the crowd. The Grit Iron Report, where the story.
Welcome to the Gridiron Report, your Lions First All Detroit Sports podcast, presented by Mic Drop Studios. Today is Wednesday, March 4th, and just 1 week away from the NFL free agency officially starting. The Detroit Lions have made a trade. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, I'm sure you've already seen it. When it first broke, there's a few different reports as to what the trade actually was. Now we have somewhat of an idea of what it was. The Detroit Lions trading David Montgomery to the Houston Texans for a 4th rounder, a 7th rounder, and offensive lineman Juice Scruggs. What a all first team name there, I guess. But we'll break down what this means for the Lions, what this means for Jahmyr Gibbs, what this means for Demo, what this means for our priorities heading into free agency next week. We have a little NFLPA report cards and Grid of the Week later on. So first and foremost, David Montgomery no longer here in Detroit. Really sad to see him go. It's not really a surprise, right? Because David Montgomery had basically asked out, and the writing was on the wall with him. We talked about it last year during the season. You can go back to one of our shows that we were just hoping that he was okay wholeheartely being like second fiddle to Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously last year it was 1A, 1B with Gibbs and David Montgomery. This year very much was 1 and 2, just based on how good Jahmyr Gibbs was, and Demo still has some left in the tank, and to his credit, he deserves to be a running back 1 rather than a backup running back there. But David Montgomery no longer here in Detroit. Pretty sad.
Dude, it's really sad, man. We are not so far removed, only, one full season removed from just classic Sonic and Knuckles, where, these guys were just scoring touchdowns at will. Just this duo, it was incredible to watch for, three full seasons of it, 4 full seasons, however long we had Monty for. But yeah, they set the NFL record for touchdown scoring running back duos. The amount of games that they both scored, which is it's really tremendous. And I have such fond memories of David Montgomery. Like we all love Monty. We love Demo. Like he was very much a part of the heart and soul of this Lions team. So yeah, to see him go, very much bittersweet. I'm very sad to see him go. But you mentioned it. The writing was on the wall for one way or another. It's just that when you have Jahmyr Gibbs and we have like maybe the best running back in the league, he's going to eat up carries from a guy like David Montgomery. So it makes sense. I still think Monty has a lot left in the tank, and I think he's going to have a lot of success in Houston. Houston's a team that really needed a running back. We'll break down who won and lost the trade just probably in like 10 seconds. Just right now, I'm sad to see him go, even though it is probably the right move from the Lions standpoint.
This one 100% is a business move. And you think back to like Brad Holmes' first real true business move that needed to be made that we as fans were sad to see, and that was Jamaal Williams. When Jamaal came here in Detroit with the real true first turnaround, the fans loved Jamaal and his weirdness and what he kind of was able to revive his career. And we didn't want to move on from Jamaal, and then kind of out of nowhere, obviously less on the wall for Jamaal than it was for David Montgomery. But we moved on from Jamaal Williams. We ended up signing David Montgomery, and that was one of the best decisions that Brad could have made. Jamaal had like a half a good season, and then David obviously turned into what it was here. So just going over some of the numbers, David Montgomery, obviously he signed here 3 years ago. It's 26 age season. It says he played in 14 games both last year and the year before. I should say last year as in not this most previous year, but his 27 year. So his first 2 years in Detroit, he played in 14 games, and he started all 14 games, which is kind of surprising. Obviously, that first year might have been Jahmyr Gibbs' first year, so it makes sense that David Montgomery probably got the nod. But a little surprising that Demo ended up starting every game for them last year. His first season here in Detroit, 219 rushing attempts for just over 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns. Last year, that 219 rushing attempts went down to 185 for 775 yards, 12 touchdowns, so pretty much the same amount of touchdowns. Obviously, a lot less touches and a lot less yards. And then this past year, those touches went down even further to 158, which I think was a career low for him outside of maybe his career low. Even his rookie season with Chicago, he had 242 attempts. Oh my gosh, they were running him into the ground. But 158 last year, still had 716 yards. So just about, 50 or so yards short than the year before, but obviously had about 30 to 40 carries less and only 8 touchdowns. So I think when we're watching that season, we all saw in real time that David Montgomery was not being used as much. He still was having great success, but I think these numbers are a little bit surprising to me that he almost put up the same amount of yards as he did 2 years ago when we were really focused on him and like I said, that 1A, 1B, as opposed to last year when it was 1 and 2. Almost the same amount of yards, which was surprising to me.
Let's not scoff at 8 touchdowns either. That's a good season. That's a really good season, especially from your running back too. So I mean, I'm looking at, what is that, 33 touchdowns in 3 full seasons for the Lions for David Montgomery. That is just, you mentioned it, but that's just a hell of a signing from Brad Holmes to bring him in. Just really selling high on Jamal Williams. He was coming off a 17 touchdown year. People might forget that, but we completely revamped the running back room, bring in Gibbs, bring in Montgomery, and just turns into Sonic and Knuckles. So it's certainly bittersweet. Dude, it's even to the point where Sonic and Knuckles, it was so big. My Netflix account at home is just Sonic the Hedgehog, and then my roommate's is Knuckles. So it was huge, and obviously not to quite the extent this past season, but still, you mentioned it, 716 yards, 8 touchdowns. Still a great season for Monty, so I do think he has a lot left in the tank. I am curious though. You gotta grade both teams in this trade. Who won the trade, Texans or Lions?
I think this is really straightforward for me. When the trade originally broke, and we had a little bit of a source off because it was originally reported that David Montgomery was going to Houston for a 5th round pick, and I think if that were the case, that would probably have leaned towards Texans. I think their offensive line is kind of in shambles last year. Wasn't very good. They, like you said, they need a running back. They really struggled with Joe Mixon with his health. Woody Marks is a great young running back, but they need a duo to go with him, with Nick Chubb being basically dead. And so for a 5th round pick, I think that was pretty much, that was pretty level, if anything, towards the Texans. And then it came out that it actually was a 4th rounder, a 7th rounder, and Juice Scruggs, the offensive lineman, which we'll get into here in a second. That's a lot for an age 29 running back who is, the tread on his tires is starting to wear thin, I think. Like I said, he still has a lot left in the tank. But at age 29 running back is almost to, the life cycle of a running back. And with an offensive line that's already a little bit struggling, I don't know exactly how much you're going to get out of him. And for the Lions, like I said, I would have been happy with the 5th round pick. I was a little bit underwhelmed, but with a 4th and a 7th and an offensive lineman that has potential, and again, we'll get to him in a second, the Lions won this wholeheartedly, in my opinion.
Yeah, and how about Rappaport walking that back, and he's like, yeah, well, a 4th and
basically
and a 7th, and yeah, Scruggs is basically a 5th. I can't tell if he's still rage baiting me with that, but I got so angry and just confused. I'm like, how does that equal a 5th? But that's neither here nor there, rap sheet. But yeah, I think that okay, it is a win-win for all the things that you just mentioned. And I think I said it before, but Monty's gonna have a good season in Houston. I can just feel it, man. I think he's got a ton left in the tank. But yes, his 29 season, year 30 season, there is probably gonna be some regression eventually, and probably sooner rather than later. So from that standpoint, the Lions didn't want to pay him anymore, especially in a more limited role. If his touches keep going down and maybe he only gets 130 touches, you can't be paying a guy what the Lions were paying him to do that role. So I totally get it. I like that they got some draft capital back. I think before that trade, we might have only had a handful of picks in the top 100, and that's just with us basically handing out 3rd round picks to trade up for guys in the last couple of drafts. So I do like that we got a 4th back, a 7th. It's almost worthless, but I guess you never know. And then just a young offensive line player where you never really know. I think there's probably some red flags for me, not knowing really anything about Scruggs versus just what I've kind of read up on the last couple of days. You look at that Texans offensive line last year, they really struggled, and yet he still couldn't really get on the field too much. So I don't know. I don't want to read into it too much. Maybe there was some injuries. Maybe, who knows what it was. Maybe fit. And they just, the Texans didn't quite need his caliber, his skill set, but still, I think that's a bit of a red flag for me. Couldn't really start for them. Are you gonna have significant time with the Lions? But again, very young, very versatile, guard slash center. And I don't know if we were planning on talking about this, but literally right after the trade broke, the Lions announced that we were, letting go of Graham Glasgow, cutting Graham Glasgow. So, this is a guy who, you need a guy who can play center, a guy who can play guard, and Juice seems like he can do both those things. So that's certainly a plus.
So you said a win-win. I'm gonna put your feet to the fire. Someone's got to lose this trade. Who wins the trade? Who loses the trade?
Lions win the trade, and Texans lose. If I have to do like someone wins and someone loses, but in all honesty, I'm probably giving more of a letter grade, and I think a slightly better letter grade is going to the Lions. But I see why the Texans made that move. Speaking from someone who lives in Houston and surrounded by a bunch of Texans fans who's probably rubbed off on me, I am excited to see what Demo can do down here, because I think he's got something left.
And I agree completely with you on that. Just because potential, I think the potential and the excitement level in Houston is probably higher, because if you're Lions, obviously you got draft capital. It's not super high draft capital, so it's not like we're trying to pinpoint who we can get with them. Like you said, it's always good to restock the cupboards, because Brad Holmes loves to trade up for guys that are maybe a little bit of a reach. But the excitement level for Juice Scruggs definitely isn't nearly as close as it would, as I'm sure Houston fans are for David Montgomery. So just a little bit on Juice himself. Again, likely part of the all-name team in the NFL. So Juice Scruggs, he'll be going into his age 27 season next year. He is a former second rounder out of Penn State from the 2023 draft. So he's, again, 26 years old right now, going to be 27 here shortly. He was going into a contract year, and the Texans likely didn't have any want or plans to extend him or re-sign him. When they took him in the draft, he was somewhat of a reach. He was kind of projected to be maybe a third or fourth rounder. They took him in the second round, and really likely, there's no confirmed reports, but it sounds like everyone's reporting that when they took him, there was a lot of question marks, and they didn't really have a plan for him. Kind of was out of left field that they ended up taking him. Just a few notes about him and what his draft process. Back in 2019, he had a fractured vertebrae. He had to wear a back brace for 8 months due to a car accident. Again, he wasn't really a top 120 player, a little bit of a stretch in the second round for the Texans. He's gone through, I think, 2 to 3 different offensive line coaches at Texas, or at the Houstons, excuse me. So again, it doesn't really sound like there was much of a transition plan or a get him up to speed in the NFL plan. And like you said, it was just a kind of a got to make a decision on him. They decided just to basically the same thing we were trying to do with David Montgomery, get something out of him, because we're not going to keep him around into next year. Now, when it falls to the Lions side and acquiring him, there's not much excitement there. He's a guy that's played pretty much all the interior offensive line positions. He played a lot of offensive guard. Now, I will say the highest PFF grades and rankings he scored, which we go back and forth on the show for PFF. Half the time I like them. Half the time it completely contradicts the eye test and what the game itself is telling you. Whatever is more going to fit my narrative is probably whether I like PFF or not. His highest PFF games came at center. He played, I think, 9 games at center last year or the year before. So his highest PFF grade, he was like the 15th, I believe, best center in the league with those numbers, which obviously is pretty much just average, but it could be a lot worse. I'm sure the Lions had a lot worse last year. So the plan is for him, at least as of now, everything that's coming out of the Lions camp, that he's just going to be a depth piece. He's going to be someone that's not expected to start. He's going to be someone that if we need to fill in the interior offensive line positions, we can have him there. It's something that, we were down many, many guys last year, and, especially losing even more guys. You mentioned Graham Glasgow retiring, Dan Skipper retiring, and is now on the offensive line staff. We lost 2 guys there, so immediately you got to start backfilling these guys. So I think the plan is for him to be a depth piece, but I'm just excited to see what Hank Fraley can do with a guy like this, in his hands. Hank Fraley is one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. Maybe it's just somewhat of a reclamation process. I mean, the film is out there that he has good plays out there. He's got to work on his pad level. He's got to work on his hands. He's got to work on a few different things. But give Hank Fraley some unmolded clay and see what he can do with it in the form of Juice Scruggs. And suddenly the Lions might be winning this trade a lot more.
For sure, dude. And it's I think it's pretty low risk and high reward, right? If it doesn't work out, it's not like they're just completely hemorrhaging any, future assets or anything for this guy. He's just, we're going to see what he has. He's still a pretty young man. So yeah, if Hank can get him going, that'd be fantastic. And if not, like I said, it's not our, number one game plan. I'm sure we're still going to be hitting free agency. We're going to be talking about free agency probably a little bit more in next week's episode. And then, of course, we're going to, break down the draft as we get a little bit closer to April. But yeah, our eggs are not all in the Juice Scruggs basket. But, I would love to see what he has to do, what he has that he can bring to this Lions offensive line. And who knows? Like you said, he could be the next great, center or guard. We really don't know.
Yeah, so I just looked this up real quick. So last year, in 2024, was when Scruggs played a number of games at center. He was the 15th out of 30th best. Last year, Graham Glasgow was the 29th out of 32 centers in the NFL. So, like, if you're going to get 15th overall out of 30, that's obviously, like I said, just pretty much average, but still better than what we were getting last year in Graham Glasgow. So, you mentioned it, like, this, at the very least, even take Scruggs out of this for a second. A 4th and a 7th round pick for David Montgomery is pretty much what people should have been expecting. Like I said, the original 5th round, that would have been pretty much fair, maybe leaning slightly towards the Texans, but like that's pretty much what the going rate is for running backs like of David Montgomery's caliber. You look at some of the other numbers. You had some guys going for 6th round picks, a 6th and 7th, the 4th and a 5th. 4th and a 5th doesn't come around very often, so the 4th and the 7th is pretty average. And then you throw in Scruggs there. At the very least, you get those 2 draft picks, and then this also, you mentioned it. We'll talk about the priorities of where the holes we need to fill. In next week's episode as the free agency is about to start. But then this kind of changes everything moving forward in that, like, you have that depth piece. If suddenly you're in the draft and, like, that offensive lineman isn't there or it's a little bit too much of a reach, you don't have to go out and make that move. You don't have to go out and make that reach because maybe you do start with Scruggs for, part of the season and you work around towards like the trade deadline and make a move. And offensive linemen don't often move at the trade deadline, but the point still stands. Suddenly you can start looking at like, okay, no matter what, we're going edge in the first round, or no matter what, we're going, secondary safety in the first round because we don't think Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch will be ready for the first half of the season. It at least takes interior offensive linemen a little bit down further on the priority list, similar to what we were talking about last week about having Taylor Decker back. Same thing. Suddenly that is still a need because there's still some question marks there, but it's not an immediate 1A need. It's like something we can address at some point, whether it's a lower tier free agent or maybe like a 3rd or 4th or 5th round draft pick, but it's not something you need to waste a 1st round draft pick on. And so at the very least, you get those 2 draft picks, the 4th and the 7th, and suddenly you can focus more so and fill the immediate holes on like edge or something. And to me, that's a win. That's a win. And again, just to kind of tie this, with a bow from my side, very sad to see David Montgomery leave here in Detroit. He was a perfect fitting for what we wanted here. He embraced Detroit. He penned a beautiful, pretty much goodbye to Detroit, saying how like everything he does from here on out will be from what Detroit ingrained into him. So it's all love. I know there was a lot of communication going back and forth. He wasn't happy. We did right by him and shipped him off to, I'm sure, a place that he approved to really show what he's able to do. And he's a still young, good team. The Texans had to figure out their offensive line, but still a young, good team. So all in all, this is probably as good. I think personally, like, it's as good as it could get. Outside of just keeping him straight up and just running the Sonic and Knuckles duo back again, this was as good as it's going to get.
Hell yeah. Wishing Monty the best of luck. And I guess just a couple more things, housekeeping, on this trade moving forward. I don't know if we want to get into it now or not, but I would love to hear, your take on, what does this mean for Jahmyr Gibbs? Because I've seen a lot of people throwing out like, oh, now that Gibbs is the guy, is there, durability issues? He's going to be the bell cow. And like, I think that we're kind of blowing it out of proportion a little bit. Because if you look at, what Jahmyr Gibbs has done, he had way over 300 touches last year, 243 carries, and I think he had almost 80 receptions as well. So I mean, he already has the brunt of the load. So I don't know. What's your take on durability? And then I guess follow-up question, not that this is an interview or anything, but who could we target at backup running back, if any, or is the guy already in the room?
Okay, so it's like you're reading my mind because I have a list of guys of just free agents, expected free agent, not expected. These running backs are going to be free agents, and I'm just going to throw like 4 or 5 at you, just so to get your idea, your opinion on whether like who out of that group you would take. So as it relates to Jahmyr Gibbs, this definitely changes things in my opinion because I almost have the opinion of like, and I hate to say this because I love Jahmyr Gibbs and I don't like this mentality. of just running these running backs into the ground, but it's so hard to pay running, quote unquote, pay running backs because you run them into the ground so much, and then there is such that steep drop off unless you have one of the really, really elite ones that, handle their body in specific ways, like Derrick Henry's, who can go until, they're 30 plus and stuff like that. It's just so hard to keep these running backs at such a high level when you're running them into the ground. And so this definitely changes things for Jahmyr Gibbs. He's not that Derrick Henry, 6'5", 250-pound running back. He's, a little bit smaller. He's 5'9", 202 pounds. I mean, that's pretty tiny for a running back. And I mean, you mentioned it. So last year he had 243 rushing attempts. The year before that, he had 250. So almost 500 rushing attempts in the last 2 years. All signs were pointing before this to the Lions signing him, to making it a priority, signing him to a long-term deal, which I was on board with before this, this offloading of David Montgomery. But if you're going to run with I guess it depends, long story short, it depends on who we get to run alongside him. If we're getting truly like a backup guy just to come in on third downs and, these aren't going to be part of my names coming up here in a second, but like a Michael Carter or, someone who's a Sean Tucker or someone like a very smaller name, that it's really just Jahmyr Gibbs backfield and maybe every now and again we give him a breather. That scares me to sign Jahmyr Gibbs to such a long-term deal. If you're going to get somebody like a few of these guys in this list I'm about to say in a second that are a little bit bigger, and it can be more so that like Demo as like a 2, but still getting, still having a drive to himself or stuff like that, then it makes me feel a little bit better about that extension. But it scares me for Jahmyr Gibbs, honestly. At 5'9", 200 pounds, being the bell cow back, it scares me.
All right. Yeah, I will say, you're calling him a little small. 5'9", 200 is pretty prototypical, I would say, for an, like if you were, making a NFL running back in a lab, like I think you're probably making Jahmyr Gibbs with he's still, enough size, and he still just has blazing like 4.3 speed. So yeah, just want to say, like, Gibby, like you're just fine, man, just the way you are. But I'm with you to an extent. Do I think that Jahmyr Gibbs is just all of a sudden like going to get hurt a ton because he's the bell cow? No, but as the years go on, it's probably more of a risk. So to your point, if you're signing him to a big 4-year extension or whatever, new contract, I don't really know what they're going for, but it's going to be a huge contract. He's probably going to be the highest paid running back in the league, and I would say rightfully so. But that comes with you probably do want an insurance policy of bringing in someone who could still soak up like 100 carries, 110 carries, and he's not just like a throw-in guy for the goal line. I would like to still have a guy, knowing that the Lions offense is going to want to run the ball and run the ball. It's pretty much what we do. And I'm totally fine with that. I love that. But yeah, you don't want Jahmyr Gibbs having like 275 carries a year, every year. Like, I think if he floats right between that 225 and 250, that's probably fine. But would love to bring in a guy, because just for me, I just don't think that, Sione Vaki is the guy to be like our number 2. I don't know. It just seemed like he's been such a project. He's been a special teams guy. He's been okay. Like, I don't really like what I've seen from him at running back. So I feel like you got to bring in a guy.
Yeah. So that let's go there next, because it is kind of crazy that I think sometimes lesser and more in recent months and maybe this past year, but I think sometimes Brad Holmes gets a little bit of a pass because of his insane first 2 draft class in which he hit. I mean, he went like 7 for 8 on guys, like elite guys with Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, Aleem McNeil, those guys. I feel like he gets a little bit of a pass because like Sione Vaki, he was a 3rd round draft pick, I think. So like theoretically, you should be able to take a 3rd round draft pick who's an insane athlete, who is listed as a running back. You have him playing free special teams. You have him playing a little bit of defense. You have every now and again playing offense. Like, he should be your guy that can step up and be a 3rd round draft pick. It's a high pick to use on somebody like that. He should be the guy. Yet I don't think anyone, Brad Holmes included, thinks that he is. So I think that's a great point, that like maybe we got to be a little bit more vocal to Brad Holmes. Not that he will ever hear us, but like we got to be aware. Like, that was maybe a little bit of a miss, and unfortunate that that's not our guy. But let me go through these 5 guys that I have. These guys are all free agents right now. They're obviously next week's show will be a little bit more so on like priorities of positions and actual guys. But let me go through these 5 guys that I think all kind of play that role of like a sidekick, a Robin to a Batman, you know, in the running back room. So number 1, Rico Dowdle, running back from the Panthers. Number 2, Travis Etienne, running back from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 3, this guy, not so much a Robin, probably a Batman in his own right. Actually, in my opinion, very similar to David Montgomery, in which like he'll probably be a bell cow back wherever he ends up going, if he goes anywhere. Kenny Walker, running back from the Seattle Seahawks. And then the last guy who I think is actually my pick. Again, we can go into that more down into next week's episode. Not actually a free agent at the moment, but the rumor is, and almost, I think I actually saw a report that it's expected that he will be cut. James Conner from the Arizona Cardinals. Any of those guys do anything for you to come here and be that Robin to the Jahmyr Gibbs Batman in our running back room?
This is an interesting list. This is not at all where I thought you were going with this running back list. First answer, like, I'd be ecstatic if any of those guys were in our running back room. I don't think we could sniff any of them except for James Conner, maybe Rico Dowdle. I don't really know the market for Rico Dowdle, but like, you know, he's coming off actually 2 very good seasons, both 1,000-yard seasons, including just a very good effort in Carolina. I don't know if Rico Dowdle's necessarily going to want to be a number 2 when I think he probably has enough to be a number 1. Granted, maybe on a bad team, but yeah, that could fit. I'm talking myself into him going to Detroit, but he kind of screams more number 1 to me, and certainly Travis Etienne, like just a really fantastic season for him, especially second half of the season. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if the Jags lock him down. I don't know. It seems like he still kind of fits what they're trying to do down there in Jacksonville. So I certainly don't see Travis Etienne going and being like a number 2 back. I still think he's young enough, and he's coming off a really good season. I don't have his stats up in front of me, but I think that he was, you know, pretty tremendous. So those would be tough. Kenny Walker, I don't see it at all. I mean, you know, the Super Bowl MVP. Yeah. I feel like Seattle is absolutely going to lock him down. It just makes too much sense. I really don't see him leaving. And then that kind of leaves James Conner, who I would be all for. Yeah, you still have the injury concern. He missed time last year. Before, you know, the year before that, he was really stellar, if memory serves. So, like I said, just kind of routing this off the dome, but I would love to have a James Conner, like, you know, hope he stays healthy, but I think he'd be a really great compliment. You know, maybe soak up a few more goal line carries. I feel like he's got to be a little bit bigger than Gibbs, but yeah, I'd probably lean Conner as the only one that we could get, and maybe Dowdle too. I could see Dowdle.
Yeah, I think I guess I'm lower on Dowdle than you. I think he would be able to come. Would be willing to come here and play that second fiddle. I agree. There's no chance in hell that Kenny Walker is going to be coming here to Detroit. So take him out, and let's put in 2 other guys: Rachaad White and Kenneth Gainwell. Either one of those 2 guys, I think. Kenneth Gainwell, Rachaad White, Rico Dowdle, James Conner, maybe not so much. I feel like those 3 are very similar in that, like, they're all, in my opinion, Robins to Batmans. You know.
Certainly, Gainwell is so much a Robin. It's not even funny. It's just that for Kenneth Gainwell, I think it's just not at all what we need. I feel like he's coming in as like your third down back who can catch passes. He's actually really good out of the backfield catching passes. So pretty much the exact skill set that Gibbs can do, just to a lesser extent. No offense, Kenneth, but that just I really feel like we need to bring in a bigger back that can soak up those goal line carries, 3rd and 1 carries maybe, where you're really just you're beating him up, and somewhere where like Jahmyr Gibbs' skill set is not necessarily between the tackles, even though he is good between the tackles. But yeah, so I would say no to Kenneth Gainwell. The other back that you gave me was Rachaad White.
Very similar to Gainwell.
Yeah.
They're both receiving backs.
Yeah, probably exactly the same. I feel like Rachaad White might be a little bit bigger. I don't know. I'm grasping at straws. Rachaad White, he's not really moving the needle too much for me. I really like James Conner. I think if you can get him on a 1-year deal, I mean, I think he's in his like year 30 season as well. And granted, coming off a very injured season, he only played a couple games last year, but assuming he can stay healthy, I think you can get one good season out of him. And he's a big back. He's easily 6 feet, maybe a little bit taller. He's certainly bigger than Jahmyr Gibbs, so he could soak up some carries. Where I thought you were going was, someone like a B-Rob, Brian Robinson, who I think is a free agent as well. A little bit younger. I feel like a guy who probably, is still good enough. Maybe Michael Carter. You mentioned Michael Carter, actually. I've seen Najee Harris thrown out there too. I think we were both so anti-Najee, it's not even funny, just from a fantasy football perspective. So I can't see Najee, but there are guys that you could bring in. I think point being, like, you definitely have to bring in one of these guys.
Absolutely. The last guy, we're going to go to a quick break here in a second. We'll come back with some NFLPA report cards. But the last guy that I just actually saw that it's being reported that he is being cut. Obviously, he can't be, he isn't at the moment, but he will be here as soon as the free agency begins. Aaron Jones, Vikings Aaron Jones. Would you, again, similar out of the backfield? He's already played for two teams in the NFC North, so there's a little bit of rivalry, revenge factor there. Aaron Jones, would you bring him in for a 1-year deal?
He's probably a little bit too old for me. He definitely missed time last year because I either had him on my fantasy team or the other guy in Minnesota whose name is escaping me, but I know that both those guys missed time. So Aaron Jones, I think, is probably going to be 32 years old when the season starts. So I would say no on Aaron Jones, even though it would be cool, I think, from his standpoint. Like, yeah, just having Green Bay on your resume, Chicago on your resume, then Detroit, like, yeah, that's pretty decent. That's pretty cool. But no, I'm not going for him.
Yeah, I think his age and his injury history there is a little bit. But again, someone that still probably has a little bit left in the tank. We'll see. Again, not very complimentary to what we need here. But I agree with you. It's James Conner is number one, I think. And I think because of the Drew Petzing hire, it has a possibility. So we'll touch on all more free agents next week. Again, if you're listening to this when we release it next week, next Wednesday is when the NFL free agency season actually begins. So teams can start signing free agents. So we'll break down our final priority list of what this team needs, where we think we can get those, whether we need to put it off to the draft, whether we think we can attack it in free agency. A few names that we like will probably come with each a few names and bounce it off the other one. So we'll get into a lot more of that stuff next week. So tune in next week. We're going to go to a quick break. And like I said, when we come back, we're going to do some NFLPA report card grades. All right, welcome back. That was a lot about the David Montgomery trade. Demo, sad to see you go. I'm jealous of you, Kyle, because you get to watch him in Houston down there. I'm sure he's obviously going to be on every bar you go to for Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday games, whatever like that. So you still get to see him. But let's move on to something that was it's always fun each year that when it gets reported. I thought I saw something that like the players or the owners were suing to not let this information get out, and that's the NFLPA report card.
It's got to be the owners. There's no way the players would sue that, right? Like
that's
that
true.
has to be the owners.
That's a great point. So I thought I saw like the owners were suing so that this information would not get released, and then a few weeks later it got released. So every year they go around to basically survey all the players. They go through and give their rankings, letter grades to different organizations for a whole bunch of different categories: treatment of families, food and dining area, nutritionists, locker rooms, training staff, weight room, strength and conditioning coaches, team travel, head coach, team ownership, basically anything that has to do with the overall franchise. These players go through and they rank and give grades to all these to all the franchise and organizations. So it's fun just to see like where these teams lie. You kind of expect. You and I were throwing a bunch of shade towards the Cardinals last few weeks ago when we were talking about Drew Petzing, and a lot of that came from stuff like this, in which these franchises just get absolutely roasted by players for the way that they treat the teams or they treat the players and stuff like that. So we have the grades from this year, where the Lions fall, and then I also have the grades from last year to see where we improved on. I actually recall filming this episode last year with you, Kyle, that most of the teams we did pretty well across the board. The one thing that really hurt the Lions just in terms of this was the locker room and overall facilities. And we talked about how Ford Field at the time and still today, just a little bit older, still very nice, but just a little bit older, which is the reason why they kind of suffered there. So this is this year's rankings. The Detroit Lions, this is how they fared. So treatment of families, they got a B+. Home field, they got B-. Travel, they got a B. Food and dining, B. Nutritionist, dietitian, A-. Locker room, A. Training room, A-. Training staff, B+. Weight room, A. Strength coaches, A. Position coaches, A-. Offensive coordinator, C-. Defensive coordinator, B. Special teams coordinator, A. Head coach, A. General manager, A-. Ownership, A. So just kind of real quick breaking those down, and then I have last year's as well. Some immediate spots that we struggled with. Obviously, offensive coordinator got a C-. That makes sense. Last year, we really struggled offensively. We obviously had the debacle that was Johnny Morton, taking play calling abilities from him mid-season. that makes a lot of sense. We really struggled with that. The only other lower grades that we got, home field, B-. We just mentioned last year kind of was said that Ford Field was just a little bit older. It was just a little bit one of the older stadiums and facilities in the NFL. Still super nice and great by all means, but those are the two grades that the Lions kind of struggled with a little bit. Before we get into comparing them to last year's grades, what are your thoughts on that overall on those reports?
Yeah, the offensive coordinator C-. Like, firstly, how's that on an F? Like, I don't. I'm probably being a little bit too harsh on Johnny Morton, but like, you come in, you're brought in for a job, you lose that job in like week 6, and then you're fired after the season. Like that kind of screams F to me. So sorry for the Johnny Morton shade there, but C- does seem generous there. Something sticks out to me, and obviously the best way possible. Dan Campbell, I think, what'd you say? Did he get an A+? Like, that definitely puts him in like the top 5 ranked head coaches in the league. And I think I saw somewhere, literally like 100% of players surveyed said that he was, efficient with his time, highlighted his willingness to listen to the locker room. Like, these are just like, we know this, like there's really no surprise, but it's great to hear it from a player's perspective. They, we as fans are hearing it from, the third, fourth, whatever source. The players are literally living and breathing it every day. So for them to say, 100% of players to say like, yeah, he's the guy, he's awesome, A+, like that tells us everything we already know. But it's great to see. And front office, I think our front office got an A- too. Ownership got somewhere A-. I think it speaks volumes. It's something where we could never say that as Lions fans.
Yeah.
Like, pretty much our whole lives, our father's whole lives, their father's whole lives. Like we have had the worst ownership possible. You had, Henry Ford's sons who were just like, totally hiring their friends and just, creating a complete shit show for the franchise for decades and decades. And now finally, you have Sheila Ford, who has righted the ship and, got the guys in charge who know, how to command, just literally leaders of men. And with, Dan Campbell, with a guy like Brad Holmes, who we do throw shade at Brad Holmes at times. He's not perfect. I think that we're, within our rights as fans to still throw some shade, but overall, like, if this is the Detroit Lions, like this is a very much a historically losing franchise, and they've completely turned this franchise around to where we do have Super Bowl aspirations, even though still haven't been to one, but the aspirations are very much there. So I think that definitely speaks volumes, and I obviously like what I see there.
I think that was exactly what I took the most, and just like team ownership. Last year we got a B+. This year it went up to an A. And obviously, like we saw, this year didn't go as planned. It was the worst season in general. But like ownership, the league notices that Sheila cares, and that's something that we as fans, it's so refreshing to see an owner that's like in the locker room every single game. And I see that from Tom Gores, whether like him or not, with the Pistons. Tom Gores does kind of the same thing. So obviously, my eyes draw to that first as well. I thought that it was interesting that us on this show, a lot of people in Detroit, nationwide, really, they talked about all the injuries that the Lions players have and went through this year, and it's unfortunate, and we'd be lying if we said, and we haven't talked about, maybe this training staff needs a shakeup. Maybe we need to get some new guys in there to try and avoid some, what are we doing wrong as a training staff that is giving us all these injuries? And at the end of the day, the training staff for the Lions this year got a B+. So it just goes to show that, like, the injuries are just sometimes just unavoidable, and it's just bad luck. And sure, maybe the players just like the training staff and like the people that are working there, and they like the processes. It's not working, but they like them, so that's why they give them a better grade. Probably not. Probably is that they actually know what they're doing, and it just was bad luck. But it's something to remember there. Injuries suck, but the training staff is usually not to blame there. The only thing comparatively to last year, locker room again. Last year got a C+. Locker room this year got an A. So to my knowledge, I don't know of any locker room renovations that went on. I think there's some plans here shortly to do some renovations to Ford Field. But obviously, locker room had a huge glow up from C+ to A. And then obviously we had the offensive coordinator debacle that obviously dropped us down this year, like we said. So overall, it's pretty much the same, a little bit more notice league-wide of the front office. And then obviously the Johnny Morton debacle. Just a few things just across the league, just for fun, stuff outside of the Detroit Lions. Some other things, teams that kind of stood out. You had the Jacksonville Jaguars, who got an F for treatment of family. I thought that was pretty important. You had, for team ownership, a C- coming from the Kansas City Chiefs, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Wow.
Just because the Chiefs, obviously Patrick Mahomes and a juggernaut, but and I think actually the Hunts are one of the most wealthy owners in all of sports. They're like top 3 or 4, I think, in all of sports. And so for team ownership to get a C- for them there, the New England Patriots got a D for team ownership from Robert Kraft. So that's interesting that, again, just were represented in the Super Bowl, and they got a D. They actually got an F for team travel, an F for the weight room, C- for training room, C- for locker room, a C for food and dining. The Patriots kind of got destroyed in this. But it's just interesting to see kind of what surprises you from different teams, what teams have great facilities, what teams treat their players right, what teams feed their players right, what do teams think of different. The poor Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals, an F- for treatment of families from the Bengals, a D+ from treatment of families from the Browns, food and dining, an F for the Bengals, a C- for the Browns, a locker room F- from the Browns, D+ for training room. So a few of these teams just getting absolutely roasted. So it's nice that the Lions are once again back up there with the top of the teams in this in the NFL.
Did you see the Steelers are just getting dragged as well? I think they ranked dead last, but did you see the main reason why they're like going viral right now?
Oh, you know what? And before you go, I just realized all those report cards I was just listing out were from 2025. Strike that. I'm sure it's all the same from the Bengals and the Browns and stuff. That it hasn't gotten much better. But what are the Steelers getting dragged for this?
Yeah, their locker room only has 5 bathroom stalls for like a team of 53 players plus obviously staff too are in and out of there too. I thought that was hilarious. Like five stalls. Like I mean you gotta be just have so many guys just holding in shit like the entire like half the game. Like sorry boys, like shitter's full. Like
dude, these are 330-pound, 6'5", 6'6" men, and they're just like waiting in line to destroy these poor toilets like that. And that's why I cannot imagine that's true. I hope that's just a rumor, but that is insane that an owner would be like, no, 6 is too many. Get rid of that last one. Let's just go with 5 in the install here.
Dude, so crazy. And then you hear stories that like someone wants to squash these report cards. Like, oh, I wonder who that is. Maybe it's the owners who are too fucking cheap and like don't want to actually do anything, spend the money to make things better for the the players, their families, everything. Like they just don't want to get dragged for it because that's money in their pocket if they don't have to spend. So yeah, shame on you owners. But I do think overall, like the Lions think we ranked 9th in the entire league, and there was a lot of really good things that this franchise is doing that, like, I mean, we could not say any of this. Even 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we could not say any of this. So I definitely think we're going in just a really, really great direction.
And these are obviously things that the players already know, right? Like, there's already there's already an idea, and what's the word I'm thinking about? There's already an understanding of like which of these franchises are cheap. The players already know all this stuff. All this really does is kind of give the fans an insight into that life of like why maybe these free agents don't ever go to Cleveland or why they don't ever go to Cincinnati other than, a huge contract. And so I think this absolutely just applies a little bit of pressure to the owners. So I get why they wouldn't want it out there, but I think it's transparency and it gives fans a little bit of, pressure to put towards the owners. So I like it. I don't like
Especially like sorry to cut you off, but like just like a losing franchise, like and no offense to the Browns because like I said we are historically a losing franchise too, but like if you're a losing franchise and like you still rank like dead last in the league and all of these little things too and little intangibles, like how are you expecting to get any kind of free agents or even like your draft picks? Like how do you get them fired up to come to Cleveland when like everything about you sucks, like, and you just fired your coach, like. So I'm going on a Browns tangent. I'm sorry, Browns fans, if there's anyone listening, but yeah, dude, like, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's a little embarrassing.
Oh, 100%. It's like we're doing everything we can, but like somehow we just can't get out of the basement. And it's like, well, no, look in the mirror, like work inwards and do everything you can. Work on the things you can control. You can control only having 5 stalls in your locker room for the 52 350-pound men that need to share these. You can control that. You can control, how we treat families. You change that stuff, and that's how the culture all starts. And that's what I think going back, look at this, ready? Circling all the way back to the line. That's where Sheila Ford has done a fantastic job with like starting with the culture and changing these things and changing Detroit in general and putting us on the right path. So we'll check back in next year as long as the owners don't sue again to limit these releasings. We'll check back in next year to see where we got even better, where we got worse, stuff like that. So, all right, let us wrap up the show with our Grid of the Week. Before we do that, Grid of the Week, as always, is brought to you by Pins and Aces. Pins and Aces is a Colorado-based golf brand making premium polos, head covers, and gear that perform on the course and stand out everywhere else. This is stuff that's made in the USA with quality that you can actually feel. All of our listeners can enjoy an exclusive discount with our promo code GRIT at pinsandaces.com. That's GRIT at pinsandaces.com. 21% off any product. It's starting to be spring. It's officially March. March Madness is right around the corner. Nothing better than watching 8 hours of college basketball, sneaking away for a few hours, hitting the links, playing a few quick round of golf, coming back, watching more college basketball. The weather's starting to turn. Get out there, get prepared. Go to pinsandaces.com. 21% off any product. Promo code GRIT, pinsandaces.com. I'll kick us off with my grit of the week. I'm going to go a little bit off here, a little bit off the beaten path. I'm going to say my grit of the week is actually going to go to, and I don't know exactly who I need to give this grit of the week to. So if this guy actually had nothing to do with this, congrats, you're just getting a free grit of the week. I had to assume he had something to do with it. But I'm going to give my grit of the week to Chris Ilitch. Chris Ilitch, because we've been pretty heavy scrutinizers of Chris Ilitch on the show. A lot of people in Detroit have. He's historically a very cheap owner. It's infamously difficult to watch the Detroit Tigers and the Detroit Pistons and the Red Wings. And I shouldn't throw the Pistons in there as well, but the Detroit Red Wings and the Tigers. It has now been released that the Detroit Tigers television plans are coming into focus. We finally have a software and a network in which we can watch the Detroit Tigers and the Detroit Red Wings. So starting this week, we can begin to sign up for the, let's see what it's called. It's going to be called, wait for it, where is it? The Detroit Sports Network. The Detroit Tigers are going to be televised there. It's going to be including the Red Wings. Not sure if it's going to include the Detroit Pistons at this time, but it's going to be $19.99 per month, or I think $190 for the year. But this is such a low bar that, like, I know I'm giving it to Chris Ilitch for setting such a low bar, but finally figuring it out, getting our rights away from FanDuel Sports, which obviously I think ended up going under, or whatever they were ended up doing. But finally giving the fans a way to watch the Detroit Tigers and the Detroit Red Wings. Such a low bar, but I'm so happy that, like, take my money. I will pay $20 a month to watch the Tigers every single day, in the summertime, making an easy app or something on my TV. Shout out to Chris Ilitch, finally figuring it out and giving us a platform that we can watch the Tigers, the Red Wings, and hopefully the Pistons on as well. I think that would be nice to throw them in there as well. But to Chris Ilitch, my grit of the week for finally figuring that out.
That's so cool, man. And yeah, it's a low bar, and yet, like, it's a bar that, like, very few owners, like, no one can figure it out. And, like, I know it's got to be complicated, like TV rights. It's extremely complicated. It seems like, I don't know, somehow there's no money in it because, like, you got, like, Fox Sports Detroit and FanDuel Sports who bought them, and then, now they're Bally's under, whatever. There's so much that's happened in the last, like, even in the last 3 or 4 years, that it's like, all right, there must be just zero money in it, or else, like, some these networks would continue carrying these games. But yeah, Ilitch got it done. It's awesome, and I'm hoping that you don't need to have, like, be located, like, physically in Detroit and have, like, some kind of IP address to be able to watch it. Like, I'm hoping that, like, anyone can access it throughout the U.S. Because yeah, I'm going to be spending money. A lot of times I'm illegally streaming, or sometimes I can get, because I'm out of network, I can get those Detroit network games, but it's it's sometimes it's difficult. So yeah, long-winded answer. Awesome grit of the week, Chris Ilitch, well deserved. Selfishly, I'm hoping that I can take advantage of it too.
Yeah, I think I would assume so. We'll have to see. I guess my last thing on that, I think the Tigers are supposed to start this upcoming season, and obviously their season is going to start here in a few weeks. We'll get into them in a few weeks and their spring training and stuff like that. But the Red Wings, I believe, aren't until next season. So more information to come on that.
Sweet. Sick. All right. My grit of the week, I'm very much going back to the well with this guy who is just on a tear. Like, I'm not going to say the G word, the generational run word, but if I did, it would be because of Jalen Duren. Grit of the week. Like, I mean, he's been He's been so awesome. His last 5 games, he's just putting up just absolute numbies. 26 points, 25, 29 points, 33 points. I think he just had 16 in his last game he played, but and that's to add, to 13, 14 rebounds, 15 rebounds. I think he had 16 in a game. So yeah, just an absolute beast, doing everything for the team when Beef Stew is still serving his suspension. I think Stew's got to be coming back soon, but there we go. Yeah, very soon. But in his absence, like, Jalen Duren has just been a wrecking ball, and we're still winning games too. Like, despite, I will say, we're not talking about the Pistons too much right now, but like, we're playing a lot of really good teams who are just resting like 2 or 3 starters at a time, or pick up random injuries. So we're getting a little lucky there, but I'm not complaining at all. Pistons still rolling, they're still winning. That's always a good thing. They're actually playing right now as we record. They're playing the Cavs again, but just grit of the week. Really can't say anything else other than Jalen Duren is just blossoming has blossomed in front of our eyes into one of the best centers in the league, and he's just an absolute force to be reckoned with. Playing better defense, like, he's doing everything, man. So grit of the week, Jalen Duren.
We'll never apologize for playing the team in front of us, and like you said, we're just kind of squeaking by with these teams. Like you said, we're not talking about the Pistons, but you and I were talking this week is like, we won 2 games that made me feel worse about this team, even though we won. But the one thing I didn't feel bad about was, like you said, Jalen Duren. He has been insane. We needed him to step up defensively, be what he was last year. Offensively, it's just a lob threat, and just to step up his defense in order to be what this team needed. And he's done both in tremendously. His defense has been fantastic. His offense has gone to a different level. He's still that lob threat, but he's still able to hit at a little bit more of distance. He's obviously not out to the perimeter yet, or if he ever will be, but he's able to get basically what he wants anywhere inside the perimeter. He's fantastic. He, like you said, holding down the fort while Beef Stew is out. At this point, like, the money should already be stashed away for him. Like, don't let him leave Detroit. He's still 22 years old, which is insane that he's just such a man and still 22 years old and this good. Who knows what he can do? I mean, I think, not confirming this, I think I want to say last I saw, Cade was 3rd in MVP voting and Jalen Duren was 6th, which is the highest I've ever seen him. I'm sure it's the highest he's ever been. To take the step that he did, has been, shout out Jalen Duren. He is everything that we needed him to be. Now we just need the 3-point shooting around him to come to fruition, or at least just appear. And who knows where this team will end up going. So shout out to Chris Illich, shout out to Jalen Duren there. All right, that's our show. Thank you guys for tuning into this week's episode. You can find both Kyle and I on Twitter at Kyle_Marino and myself at Dutton_Tyler. You can follow the podcast itself on Instagram or on TikTok at Gridiron Report, on Twitter at Gridiron Report 1, or you can watch these full-length episodes on YouTube at Gridiron Report. Finally, you can join the conversation next week by calling into the Gridiron Report voicemail for us to play and discuss on that podcast. Lions free agency coming up next week. Who do you guys want us to attack and address in the free agency? Maybe someone specifically you want us to address in the draft. Call that hotline. Leave us your opinion. We'll play it and discuss it on the podcast. That phone number is 313-306-7939. And then finally, if you like this episode, please take a moment to rate it 5 stars. Leave us a review saying so. Follow us on all forms of social media. Tell your friends about us. We just love talking Detroit sports, and you guys allow us to do that. So thank you guys for listening.
Thanks, y'all. Restore the roar.
A journey roads paved with fire, sweat, tears, and hustle that never expire. From the rookies on the rise to the old hands retired, grit iron is the place for fans to conspire. Hustle on, blast beats, thunder and loud. Champions are born from the roar of the crowd. The Gridiron Report where the stories are proud. Tune in, bring the heat, make your fandom a vow.